Lion versus grizzly bear. These two animals are known to be the kings of their environment. Lions duel with hyenas, while grizzlies clash with wolves. But what if they fought one another? What if we took the alpha lion from its pride and put it up against a male grizzly bear? Well, this match is actually closer than one may think. And in all honesty, the lion has a better shot at defeating a grizzly bear than a tiger does. Oh no, I can already hear the angry tiger fans in the comments. Now, I'm not saying that a lion can defeat a tiger or that a tiger can defeat a lion. Don't worry, that video is gonna be made in the near future, so subscribe to see that upcoming video. Anyways, why I think a lion would have a pretty good chance at defeating a grizzly compared to a tiger is because of its fighting style and mindset. Bears and lions tend to prefer to grapple and wrestle when they fight. Tigers, on the other hand, like to stand up and strike, which doesn't really fare well against a grizzly that has a great size advantage. Now, I've experienced and done research with lions and grizzly bears in the wild, and I can safely say that this theoretical fight would be pretty close, and the decisive verdict may actually shock you. Now, I want to be as unbiased as possible and determine a victor based on science and what I've experienced. But enough of the intro, let's establish some ground rules. Let's say this fight takes place in an open field, so both animals are on neutral terrain. Let's also assume both of these animals are enraged males in their prime and willing to fight one another. So with that out of the way, let's begin the analysis. Size and physique. The African lion needs no introduction. It's the most famous carnivore on Earth for a good reason. It's a huge predatory cat that lives in the most competitive ecosystem in the world, the African savanna. So its body layout and mental fortitude are carved by the relentless conditions. In fact, it's actually one of the largest existing land carnivores. A typical African lion averages around 416 pounds in the wild and stands about 4 feet tall at the shoulder. But what truly sets it apart from other big cats is its mane. Essentially, the darker and fuller the mane, the more dominant and strong the lion is perceived to be. Now, the mane's usage is actually pretty interesting as well. Recent studies indicate that the mane's primary function is for dominance in mating displays, and not so much for fights. Wait, hold up. Then how effective is the mane for protecting the lion in fights? Well, it's just essentially a large amount of hair that can clump up and absorb minor strikes. This is due to the skin at the top of the lion's neck being a little bit looser compared to its body. It essentially enables the mane to bunch up to a certain degree when getting hit. However, it's not impenetrable. It may be able to stop some weaker hits, but think of it as very thick facial hair. And remember, lions can kill other lions, so it's not the end-all be-all when concerning defense, especially if its theoretical opponent is a determined grizzly. And speaking of grizzly bears, they do have a size advantage. A male grizzly clocks in between 600 to 900 pounds and stands around 7 to 9 feet tall. Now, it should be noted that male interior grizzlies, such as the ones in Yellowstone National Park, reach around the 600-pound range. Meanwhile, male brown bears in the coastal region of Alaska weigh around 900 pounds. So the grizzly would have an obvious size advantage in this matchup. However, the lion has a more acrobatic build, which is a pretty good advantage for reasons I will explain later on. Now, grizzlies are also built to survive harsh conditions as well. These bears have coarse fur with thick layers of fat, which make them very tanky. Its fur is basically like having a lion's mane covering its whole body. After all, grizzlies are the reason why the term bear mode exists. And apart from being very bulky, they have a huge shoulder hump on their back, which are muscles dedicated to their deltoid movements like digging and wrestling. But just remember that bears and felids have different body layouts, so having a size advantage doesn't always equate to being more powerful. African lions have their own advantages, particularly in terms of muscle layouts. Lions are more muscle dense, supporting much more explosive power. In fact, one advantage the lion has over the grizzly is the strength in its forearms and limbs. In general, when concerning average sizes, the lion's muscles in its forearms seem to be somewhat more powerful. This aspect is attributed to their way of life and hunting methods. This is proven by cross-sectional analysis of a lion's muscle, particularly in the vastus lateralis. It is comprised of around 83% fast twitch muscle fibers. Just for reference, a grizzly bear has around 55 to 63% fast twitch muscle fibers in its limbs. So what does that mean? past which muscle fibers are responsible for explosive movements. However, the bear does have a larger shoulder region compared to the lion. This translates to them having great manipulation and arm stabilization when fighting. So when concerning size and physique, I would say the grizzly takes this. It simply just has a size advantage, and its fur with its fattier build would make it more tanky. So the lion isn't winning the size game right now. But don't worry, size isn't everything, right? How these animals brawl plays an arguably more important role in this fight scenario, and the lion may even things out here. This brings me on to my second point, which is weaponry and fighting IQ. Who fights better, a lion or a grizzly? Well, both of these animals have formidable claws and strong jaws, but how they are used and their effectiveness are pretty different. Lions need no introduction in this aspect. They are the apex predators for a reason. The African lion wields razor-sharp claws that can grow up to 1.5 inches in length. That is relatively small compared to the grizzly's claws, which can grow up to 4 inches in length. However, that does not mean they are less potent. In fact, they are a lot sharper and more curved than a bear's claws. And trust me, I've seen the claws in action tear up buffalo hide before, and they are no joke. Basically, since lions are strictly an active carnivore, their claws are specifically aimed at ripping through flesh. On the other hand, the bear's claws are a bit more versatile. They are built for digging, moving rocks, and taking down prey. Thus, the grizzly bear's claws are more blunt and less curved, but overall larger. That information is good to know, but how do they actually use their claws in fights? Well, lions use them quite often. They berate their opponents with paw swipes with their sharp claws. In fact, that is one of the main ways they fight. They like to scratch and shred wounds into their opponent's body and nose region. Meanwhile, grizzlies don't really claw swipe that often, but rather use them as hooks to wrestle their opponents. Now, that's not to say that a grizzly's claws would be useless in this fight scenario, it's just that the lion uses its claws more often and would ultimately be more effective wielding them. Alright, so how about biting? Well, this is actually a pretty interesting aspect. The grizzly has an overall larger skull and more elongated snout. Its skull averages between 16 to 18 inches in length. Now the lion's skull, on the other hand, grows to about 13 to 14 inches. So essentially the bear has a bite reach advantage. Another advantage the grizzly has is a more powerful bite, but that's only by a small margin. A grizzly can chomp down with a force of up to 1200 psi. Meanwhile, a lion can bite with a force of up to 1000 psi, so they both would still hurt one another regardless. Now how these beasts use their bites is pretty different as well. Lions just get straight to the point and go for the throat, but they only do so when they are physically dominating their opponent. Essentially, it's used as more of a final shot. Now as for the bear, well, it basically bites whatever it can grab. In turn, this leaves wounds all across the body rather than a concentrated area. Also, when grizzlies bite in fights, they often like to shake their heads like dogs. The main purpose of shaking the head when biting is likely to cause more injury and to secure a good position. So to reiterate the weaponry of these two beasts, the lion has sharper claws, better strike usage, and goes for the throat when biting. The grizzly has longer claws, a larger skull, and a bite reach advantage. But weapons are only as good as the wielder. These animals fight similar but different. Now let me explain. Bears like to wrestle. That's what they mainly do when fighting. Their body supports that style by providing a powerful shoulder for arm manipulation and robust leg bones for stability. Grizzlies like to rear up and wrestle for long periods of time, often trying to off-balance their opponents so they can get a good position to bite. Now, lions tend to grapple as well, but they are more sporadic. They are more explosive when they fight and like to berate their opponents with claw strikes and bite the neck region when they are physically winning. Also, from what I have personally observed, lions tend to be more calculated and precise when they fight. They know what they're getting themselves into and thus carry a certain confidence. Basically, they are more headstrong and initiative than bears. Grizzlies, on the other hand, tend to be more reactive and curious. They don't go out of their way to fight, but if you piss one off, it's gonna gonna strike back and you aren't gonna like it. So with all that being said, for weaponry and fighting IQ, I would say they are equal. Bears are more stable and prefer to wrestle, while lions are more explosive and calculated. And sure, fighting technique and strength play a big role in brawls, but dexterity and speed is another large factor we have to consider. This brings me on to my final point, which is speed and agility. Felids, in general, are designed to be very nimble and fast. And although the lion is on the bulkier side for cats, it's no exception. This is due to their high amount of fast twitch muscle fibers, which enables their immense explosive power. Lions are capable of sprinting up to 50 miles per hour, but top speed is actually hardly a factor in fights, unless of course it's running away. But given that the lion's forelimbs aren't that much smaller compared to a grizzly's, and it has a lot more concentrated fast twitch muscle fibers, it's gonna be a lot more nimble. Lions will also have a superior turn radius given their anatomy and hip placement. Now bears, we all know what they're capable of. To put it simply, they have great endurance. Ursids, particularly grizzlies, have been known to fight for over 10 minutes. So while they may lack the lion's explosive speed, they compensate with stamina. This is due to their high percentage of slow twitch muscle fibers and their compositional anatomy. Their hind limbs and hip region are more robust and square-like, meaning they have great stability when standing up and fighting. Thus, they may not be as agile as the lion, however, they are more structurally stable. But for the topic of speed and agility, I would say the lion takes this. It's simply more quick with its movements and more explosive. However, is that enough to secure a victory? Well, with all those attributes being said, it's now time to determine a verdict. Alright, we have our stats. So, who would win between a grizzly bear and an African lion? Well, based on all my personal experiences with them in the wild and doing research, I would say the grizzly bear would win with high difficulty. In the initial confrontation, the lion may try to berate the grizzly with paw swipes while driving forward, but its moment of domination will be short-lived. The bear is overall larger and more robust. Its coarse fur and thick layers of fat can tank a lot more hits, while its sturdier legs and hips would make it very stable. The grizzly will eventually throw its weight around and gain the higher ground by grabbing the top of the lion and wrestling it down. This is when the grizzly's larger paws would come in handy. It can dish out more strike damage per swipe due to its wider paw surface area and more mass being put behind the strike. I would give the lion a solid minute or two before it gasses out, and the grizzly's endurance and constant mauling would secure it a victory. Now to reiterate, the bear would walk out wounded, but its overall bulk, endurance, and wrestling ability would make it reign victorious.